Hi, everybody. As you just heard, this is the 3 o'clock cooking demonstration. Thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Green. I'm the director of the Hormone Foundation, and we're so pleased to have you here for this final demonstration of our Cooking for Pleasure and Health program. The goal of the Hormone Foundation in having this day of cooking demonstrations is really to provide you with some practical tips and new diet strategies to share with your patients to help motivate them to eat and live in a more healthful way. Our featured chef for today and for this session has been Amy Riolo. Let me tell you a little bit more about her. She's an award-winning cookbook author, lecturer, food historian, culinary consultant, and cooking instructor. Amy has loved cooking from an early age and became committed to healthy recipes, in particular when her mom was diagnosed with diabetes, and actually developed her first cookbook as a teenager in helping her mom adjust to that diagnosis and eat and live in a more healthful way. The session today that Amy will conclude her program with is called Putting It All Together, Eating In, Dining Out, and Living Healthy. All of Amy's 3 presentations that she's given today will be available on the Hormone Foundation's website, www.hormone.org, after the meeting. And I also hope that you'll stop by the Endocrine Society booth to the Hormone Foundation kiosk after the presentation. We have some nice grocery bags full of healthful ingredients for you and some nice visuals for your patients, as well as a recipe booklet that features the recipes that Amy has cooked today, as well as several others that I think you'll find of interest. So with that, let's get cooking, and here comes Amy Riolo.
Thank you all so much for coming. How many of you were here at the earlier sessions today? Okay, so quite a few. I apologize, there's going to be a little bit of overlap, but not much, I promise. I'm just going to wrap things up. So a little bit about how I got started. Just like Patty said, I was cooking for my family when I was a kid, and my mom got diagnosed with diabetes, and she came home with a list jotted down on the doctor's prescription pad of the things that she could not eat. And she was really devastated, and we didn't know what to do because she was almost crippled by the list of things that she couldn't eat. But after a couple days, I said, let's change our philosophy here and let's think about the things that you can eat. There are a lot more things that you can eat than you can't. We started making the list. And of course, the fresh fruits and fresh vegetables, fresh grains, there were many, many more things that she could eat. So if we fast forward 22 years, I'm pretty much helping my clients and my people who read my cookbooks to do the same thing that I helped her to do at a very early age. One of the things I'd like to remind everybody as we try to inspire people is that now is the best time. Everything that we have as a resource right now is much, much better than what we had 22 years ago when I was helping out my mom. And one of those things is a lot of the top chefs are really going towards healthier lifestyles and more healthful recipes. The gentleman up here is Joel Robuchon. He is the most Michelin-starred chef in the world. He actually has 26 Michelin stars. So he's considered to be the chef of the century. And he recently started eating more healthfully and creating more healthful recipes because of his own medical complications that he's been having. So his recipes are out there, and if someone at the very top, like him, is making healthful recipes, then all of the other chefs are going to follow. So that makes our work a lot easier because the general consumer will perceive healthful recipes as being a lot more trendy and a lot more desirable. Also, Food and Wine magazine just recently in March came out with this healthy recipes issue, and they're continuing every month healthy recipes, chef-inspired recipes, and how to make restaurant foods more healthful. So this is another trend that we can look forward to. There's something in the magazine called the Food and Wine Diet, and the gentleman is Jacques Torres. Many of you might know him. He's the famous chocolatier and French chef. Some of the things that the various chefs that are featured in Gourmet and in Food and Wine mentioned in their diet is very simple, practical advice that everybody can use. One of the things is retraining your palate. So one of the chefs went vegan for 30 days. Of course, if you're a chef and you're around food all the time, you're not always eating the most healthful of cuisine. So sometimes it calls for a little bit of drastic measures. The second one is much easier, and that's find alternative ways of boosting flavor. Flavor generally comes from 2 things, fat and sugar. And whenever you add more fat and you ever add more sugar, you get a better taste. It's very easy and very inexpensive. So when you're looking for ways to improve taste without fat and sugar, it's a little bit more challenging. However, it's also very easy and very inexpensive. Some of the things that you can look to are aromatics and spices and herbs, and we'll talk about those a little bit more later on. They all agree, all of the chefs, that exercise is important, and smaller portions. Earlier today in session 1, we talked about the small plate movement, and Dr. Brian Wansink from the Cornell University Food and Brand Lab actually started a small plate movement because in his book, Mindless Eating, he did a lot of research and he proved that people who used smaller plates ate less. And if you look at the plates that we're using nowadays, they're about 4 to 5 to 6 inches larger than they were in the 1950s and 1960s. I use my grandmother's plates as a daily plate because they're much smaller. But our dinner plates that we sell in America nowadays are really what's considered platters. And if people are eating these 10 and 12-inch plates full of food at night or any time really, it's too much for a serving. So smaller plates are a good idea. The idea that you can indulge once in a while, of course, helps people to stay on a healthy living plan better. And this particular chef lost 22 pounds on Weight Watchers. However, he maintains that he still is able to enjoy chocolate through dark chocolate, which is unsweetened and has a lot of antioxidants in it. He mentioned finding ways to boost flavor. So some of the new ways, aromatics, spices, and herbs, you can get a lot of not only flavor, but also health benefits from knowing how to work with different spices and different herbs. And thankfully, there are hundreds, if not thousands of them on the market. Aromatics. Things like onions and shallots and leeks and garlic have a ton of flavor. They're very inexpensive. They're readily available and easy to use. We can use those as a base by sautéing them in almost all of our recipes to get an additional flavor boost. Here are some time-saving ways to create meals for families. The first one is to make a commitment to make menus. Menus are really important. You know, it sounds like if you don't work in a restaurant, you don't need to make a menu. But menus are important because if you make a menu, you make sure that you're getting all of your nutritional bases covered. You make sure that you're making what people like. And you have something that then you can then use and turn into a very easy grocery list. A lot of people try to make a grocery list while just having the menu float around in their head. And it's really frustrating. So take a couple minutes and jot down a menu, and they'll have an easier shopping period. Another idea is to identify the family's likes, the foods that they like to eat, from a list that you've created of what you can eat. Of course, everyone's got their own health issues, their own allergies, so each family should have a certain list of what they can eat that they could leave on their refrigerator and that they could take with them whenever they go grocery shopping. From that list, you should be able to make the ideas and really highlight what the family likes. And then categorize the list into different food groups, whether they be carbohydrates, vegetables, proteins, and that way you can easily make a meal plan just by taking 1 or 2 from each column. Other things that people have to think about are snacks and breakfast items that they like. And I always remind people to peruse magazines, internet, watch cooking shows, and ask family and friends for different recipes for new ingredients. And then, of course, to make a shopping list. When people come home from the grocery store, a lot of what I tell my students is to wash and store all of their fruits and vegetables immediately. Because if you get it taken care of, then you're much more likely to eat it, and kids or even anybody who's in a hurry can grab it and go. So that's a really good trick. Chop the vegetables for the week's recipes in advance if you buy them whole, and store them in plastic bags. That way when you come home, you want to cook, you don't have to worry about chopping, you can just go ahead and start cooking. Washed herbs can be stored inside of paper towels and then rolled and stored inside plastic bags. They'll last much longer. And then once you're home, you can also reevaluate your menu plan and look at what you actually bought. Sometimes you don't buy the same things at the store that were originally on your list. Maybe it wasn't available. So by reevaluating, you can make sure to stay on your menu plan. And cook perishable items first. A lot of people start out great on the weekend, they do their grocery shopping, they jam their refrigerator full, and then it doesn't work out through the week. So by cooking perishable items first, you're more likely to get the better usage out of your groceries. And the next step, I'm going to tell everybody about deciding what a cooking strategy should be. There's so many different lifestyles that we lead now. So the traditional 9 to 5 really isn't around anymore, and people have very busy schedules. So by identifying what their schedule is, they can come up with a cooking strategy, and that will help them to eat more healthfully. And I always say that you should know at night before sleeping what you're going to have for all of your meals the next day. If you do this, you'll be much more likely to stay on track of any meal plan, and you'll make sure that you aren't going off board or leaving yourself that temptation to do delivery and things like that. So here's a little way people can schedule it in, and that's by knowing their schedule. On the left side, you're going to see your life schedule, and on the right, you can see your cooking schedule. If people spend more than 12 hours a day outside of their home 5 days a week, really you should rely on one of your days off for all of your cooking. Get the majority of it done so that during those busy days you can either take food with you or just reheat it at night. Almost it would be like you're being your own personal chef. And they're very easy strategies. You can go online and find any kind of clues about make-ahead meals. Certain types of things lend themselves very well to this kind of cooking, and those are roasts, stews, and stir-fries. And we have some of those in our recipe packet, which we're going to be giving out in the grab bags at Endocrine Society at the end of the session. For people who travel a lot, a really good tip is to make double portions, cook them, and freeze them. And that way, when you're going to be going out of town, you know that you have things in there. If you're leaving people behind, they can take them out, thaw. When you're coming home, you can take something out and thaw it and not have to get into recooking right away. For people who spend about 9 hours a day outside of their home 5 times a week, I tell them to turn to quick, what I call one-pot meals. Things that you can cook in very quickly in one, like a soup or a stew, and have everything ready to serve at the same time. For people who do 4 times a week, 10-hour shifts, maybe they have 3 days off, on their days off, they could be doing very large family-style meals and then making double quantities of them to last them throughout the week. And for people who have a rotating schedule, whatever the day is, just designate those days as cooking and shopping preparation days to help to fit it into the schedule a little bit more. I think that people should approach cooking like they do working out. Whenever people decide they want to get healthy, they either go to a trainer or they figure it out for themselves how often they're going to work out, what they're going to do. And the trainer will always tell them to exercise and do the types of exercises that they enjoy. Same thing with cooking. You have to find something about cooking that they enjoy, and they have to be able to want to do it more often in order to stick to the plan. The trainers will tell them to vary their workout routines. Same thing with the cooking. You can't be expected to do a 2-hour meal every single night. But there are nights they can do 10 minutes in the kitchen, there are nights you can do an hour in the kitchen, and that way you'll be able to eat healthfully and fit it into a day-by-day basis. Just like exercising with friends and family helps you to stay on track, cooking with friends and family really helps you to stay on track. If you make a plan with a friend that you're going to get together at someone's house and cook, you usually do. So people can alternate one night at one person's house, one night at another, and be able to get their cooking done that way. Becoming involved is also very easy. Nowadays, there are so many different ways that people can become involved and to help the future generations learn about nutrition and learn about cooking and the great ideas about organic and sustainable farming. One of them is called Chefs Move to Schools, and this is a program that I just signed up for. This is from the USDA, and Michelle Obama is behind this program. Chefs Move to Schools is something that promotes chefs going in and adopting schools. A lot of the schools nowadays are growing their own gardens. Chefs will go in and help the students learn how to work with those crops and a lot about nutrition, a lot about cooking, and it's just a lot of fun for the kids in general. Another great organization to join is Slow Food. In Slow Food, the main idea of Slow Food is that all of the food is grown and shipped from within a 50-mile radius. And Slow Food started in Italy, but it's now very popular all over the world, and it's a wonderful model on eating better. Les Dames d'Escoffier, which is another organization that I belong to, has something called a Global Culinary Initiative. And this has many different factors to it, including teaching children about nutrition, better lunches in schools, and being able to use food policy really to our favor. Supporting better legislature and promoting better food is important. And we should also, as a culture and as cultures, think about warning labels. We know warning labels are on, for example, cigarettes and alcohol, and it tells that people who are using these products are putting their health at risk. We should think about these kinds of things as food also. And some people are already doing it. For example, in France, this is, and I have this on the program note. You can go to the website and see it. I mentioned this, www.mangerbouger.fr for France. They have warning signs, like to consume sugar in moderation. This one is recommending that people don't snack between meals. So a lot of different things as public safety can be kind of warnings with different products. And that's a great way to keep us on track also. As I mentioned, getting kids involved is very important. And I'm going to tell you this story while I come over and do my cooking demo. So the recipe that I'm going to demo for you today is a collard green recipe, and it's called Abesha Golman in Amharic. It hails from Ethiopia. And this dish goes back, I made it about 3 years ago for Bancroft Elementary School students in Washington, D.C. I'm a member of Slow Food, and my D.C. chapter called me up and they said, you know, we want chefs going into the schools. What can you teach? You have to help them cook the crops. So I said, sure, how hard can it be? I figured, you know, they'll call me in zucchini season or tomato season. And they called me and I said, okay, what's the crop? And they said, collards. And I said, oh no, collards are not one of my favorite vegetables, and they're not something that I deal with that much. I specialize in Mediterranean and Middle Eastern food, so not too much, you know, with the collards. But I didn't want to disappoint the kids, and I wanted to do something that they would like. So I said, what am I going to do? And I thought back, and this is a trick for everybody and for everyone's patience. I thought back to when I tasted the best collards that I ever tasted. And it happened to be in an Ethiopian restaurant. Ethiopians do two things very, very well, and they are coffee and collard greens. So I remember those collard greens. I said, you know, that was really tasty. Maybe I'll do that for the kids. Who's the chef before me? Because it was a series of chefs that were going to cook that day. And they said, Bill Yosis. He's the White House pastry chef. So I said, great. I said, what's he making? And they said, pizza. And I said, how come you let him make pizza and you're making me do collard greens? But anyway, I thought about, you know, how can I make this fun for the kids? So I made a little PowerPoint all about Ethiopia and Ethiopian kids eating collard greens. And they loved it. Third graders, Bancroft Elementary School, never had greens before, never had collards, absolutely loved it. They were begging me for seconds. They wanted to bring some home to their parents. They put collard greens on the school menu, and they use it as an example for the new program they're having. So I tell people who think that kids can't eat certain things, you know, just make it a little bit romantic for them, give them a little bit of history. They're just like us. I mean, they want to be romanced, and they want food to be exciting. So we have to, if, you know, this pot will not do it on its own. We really have to inspire them. So now that my pan is heating up, I'm going to go ahead and add some olive oil. And these are the raw collards. What I did was I just cleaned them, and then I took the roots off. Then I steamed them in a little teeny bit of water just for 10 minutes, just until they became soft like this. And then I'm going to add them into this recipe. So my oil is hot. I'm going to go ahead and add the onions. We had to chop these onions with the kids, and their little eyes were watering, and the whole room smelled like onions and garlic. But they really liked it. So this is just one red onion. And I'm going to also add some garlic that I've chopped, and a green chili. It looks just like this. I just chopped one up. You can add two. Ethiopian food tends to be very spicy. And you know, whenever you're working with hot flavors, you get full faster, and the heat aids digestion. So that's a good little tip to remember too. If you can handle heat, a little bit is really a good thing, because it will help you to eat less. I'm just going to stir these around. No, they're chopped. Very good question. She asked if I chopped the collard greens, and they're whole. Now, traditionally, Ethiopians will eat this with injera bread. And injera is that great brown bread that looks like a sponge. It has the big holes in it, and they use it like a utensil. So it's very soft, and you just scoop it up. So one of the students at my school that I was teaching at happened to be from Ethiopia. So I asked the parents to bring me in the bread, and they did, and we served it traditionally. As a swap out for that, you could definitely use pita, whole wheat. Now, the injera bread is made with teff flour. Teff is spelled T-E-F-F. It's a flour which hails from Ethiopia, and it has a lot of protein in it, so it's good for you. So even though we're doing collard greens in this recipe, really any vegetable would benefit from this treatment. It would be absolutely delicious, because in addition to this great flavor base, we're adding in some fresh ginger, then we're going to have some crushed chili, and a little bit of stock. So I don't think there's a vegetable in the world that doesn't taste good with all of those flavors going on. And you can also use kale or Swiss chard really easily too in this recipe. So I'm going to add in my garlic. I'll have a little bit of crushed red chili for some more heat. If you don't like the heat, you could leave out that chili that we added in. And instead of this guy, you could just use some green bell pepper. It would still give it color, would give it a little more flavor, but you wouldn't have to worry about it being too hot. And I'm going to add, this is 1 red bell pepper that I just diced up. Everything's starting to saute now. You can smell the aroma. You guys will be getting it back there in a few moments. When you have the traditional Ethiopian meals, they usually serve it on a large piece of injera bread. And then they have in little sections on each piece of the bread, little things. There'll be a yellow lentil dish, and they'll have the green kale dish, and they'll have a little bit of meat, and they'll have, so you have all the complete nutrients there together. And I think it's important when people are eating out to have kind of an arsenal. In the packets that you're going to get, there's a diabetes tip sheet. And it has some things like this on it, creating plans for eating out. I think it's good to have a nice little arsenal of restaurants and takeout places in your head that you have, if you have to go to, that you know. And one of the things I tell people are really good restaurants with of different ethnicities that happen to use a lot of vegetables and fruits and grains in their cuisine. You know, it's hard. Modern American food doesn't use so much of the grains and vegetables and legumes. But if you look to Ethiopian cuisine, Indian cuisine, Korean cuisine, different Latin cuisines, you'll be able to find a lot of these ingredients, and they can become easy go-to restaurants when you want to still stick to a healthful eating plan, but enjoy good food at the same time. So now that these are sauteing up, I'm going to go ahead and add in my collards. And this is, what I have here is about 1.5 heads. So keep that in mind if anyone's buying them. They come in the big heads like romaine lettuce. About 1.5, once you steam it, it's going to steam down, just like the spinach. So you want to always buy more than you think you need. I'm going to season with some salt and pepper. And once this is all coated, I'm just going to add my vegetable stock. You could use water. If you had chicken stock at home or any other liquid that you wanted to use, that would be fine. And we'll let this simmer for about 10 minutes, and then the collard greens will get nice and wilted, and they'll be ready to eat. Does anyone have any questions? Yes?
You said the bread's made out of teff?
Correct.
That's gluten-free, isn't it?
Yes. She asked if the bread, the traditional Ethiopian bread, the injera, is made with teff, and is it gluten-free? And yes, on all counts. It's made with teff, high protein, gluten-free. There are other traditional Ethiopian breads, white breads that kind of look like a flat pizza and different things, but the traditional one that they use for eating things like this is very flexible, and it's made out of the teff. And you can buy the teff at Whole Foods. Sorry?
Sorry. How does that hold together without the gluten in it?
Well, the gluten is what helps it to develop the rise. So it doesn't rise, it's just flat, but it will still hold together. And that's why it has the little holes in it, which are carrots. It's kind of like a sponge. So if you're eating a stew with it, it's very nice to be able to soak things up. And we're going to find more and more flours that are great on the market because so many people with the gluten intolerances. So there's a great market for it, and they're healthy for anybody, regardless. Now, I've substituted today. I did find a great little Ethiopian restaurant online. I was going to pick up the injera, but I think you guys will get the picture. These are now sold at Whole Foods, and it's wheat flour and lentil. There's actually lentil in the bread, and so that's what gives it its unique shape. The injera is more springy, but this would be a good option too because it would still taste good. You could use this as a topping, and it's the same kind of color type of feel. Or you could ease it without bread over a rice or another grain. It would also be very good. Any other questions?
Do you serve this as more of a main course or a side, or with
That's a
meat,
great question.
Or
This is a perfect side dish. It could be accompaniment to stewed lentils and a little bit of meat. It could be in place of meat, with some other bean dishes and things like that. But it could be either way, part of a nice vegetarian meal, or part of a meat meal, but not by itself. For example, a place like Ethiopia, they have a lot of vegan days because they are Orthodox Christians, and during their fasting holidays, they don't eat any dairy products, so they're pretty much vegans. And this type of recipe would be able to be served then because it's a vegan-friendly recipe. But you'd want to serve it with some kind of protein so that it'd be a full meal.
And I have another one for you. In terms of the kids that you taught how to make this, I mean, I'm sure they enjoyed actually making it, but it's also kind of fun to eat because it's, you know, they get to eat with their hands and dig in with the bread. And
exactly.
Yeah.
The kids love to eat with their hands and to be involved and to be able to see something that they grew, they picked it, and then they made it, and they really, really liked it. And I give them credit for trying it, but they really did a great job. So I've adopted a new school. There's a school called Walker Jones in DC, and they have a new wonderful garden that's right down the street from the Capitol building. And that's the new school I've adopted, so we're going to be doing all kinds of fun things. And they have persimmon trees and fig trees and all kinds of fun crops that a lot of the local population hasn't eaten yet. So maybe next year I'll have some more success stories for you.
What would you think about adding some meat to this dish? Would that be blasphemous, or so you could make it like a stir fry and it'd be the
Sure.
complete?
Yes, that's a great question. Could you add meat to this dish? And the answer is yes. It wouldn't be a traditional Ethiopian dish anymore, but it would still be very tasty. You could have little pieces of chicken breast that you saute in the very beginning when you're doing your onions. That way it has time to cook through. Little teeny tiny pieces of beef that you want to do anything appropriate for a stir fry would work here. Sure, good question. Yes, this is one of the recipes in the book. Let me read through for you while we're waiting for that to cook some of the other recipes that are in there. I wanted to give like a really good cross-section of recipes and then a lot of recipes that people could take and change. Because there's only 16 recipes here, but I like people to have a lot of different change. So there's hummus, we made that earlier today. Strawberry smoothie, which they could make with any other fruit that they wanted to. A whole grain pilaf, they could swap out the different whole grains and do things in there. Minestrone, which is really, really easy. You can do different vegetables in there if you want. Last session we did a stir fry, and we did it with sweet potatoes and broccoli and red peppers, but you could use any fruits and vegetables that you wanted. Chicken herb burgers, they were selling those over at the concession stand earlier. Those could be done also with turkey or with veal or lamb or whatever kind of meat you wanted to use. There's a tomato, pepper, mozzarella, and caper salad. Israeli couscous with cannellini beans and vegetables, our collard greens. There's a Spanish quinoa and black bean skillet, Moroccan vegetable stew, Central American coleslaw, a really good dessert for the summer, plums in a basil yogurt cream with pistachios. This is really good where you roast the fruit. You buy the fruit and it's a little bit hard. You don't want to get the really mushy plums. You can also do peaches or apricots. You take the pit out and you put them into a baking dish, 425, about 15 minutes. They start to get really soft and caramelized. Then you take them out and you make a cream with just French vanilla yogurt that you've strained, a little bit of honey, and a little bit of chopped basil. And put the cream in the middle of each one. And people will love it, regardless of if they're a diet or not, because we're not used to eating roasted fruit that much anymore, but it makes a great dessert. It's very sweet. And the kids love it. I did this one a couple months ago. I was in Abu Dhabi doing a show similar to this one, and all the kids loved it. Bean, barley, and vegetable soup is in here. Artichoke and asparagus frittata, and a tomato basil soup with orzo and cannellini beans. And you're also welcome to go to my website. I have hundreds of different healthy recipes there that you can access and maybe be an inspiration. So this is finishing up now, and I'm just going to plate it. So there we have our Ethiopian collards. Does anyone have any other questions? It's the end of the day. I know you guys are probably really ready to get out of here, but thank you so much for your attention. It's been wonderful.
And thank you, Amy, very, very much. I certainly have learned an awful lot, and will go back home and my family won't know what hit them. So thank you very much for all your wonderful tips and advice. There are bags back here for you if you'd like, with the recipe booklet from Amy. And we look forward to seeing you next year. Thanks.